The House Education and Workforce Committee will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair DeBoer.
Here.
Representatives Linting.
Here.
Kett.
I'm here.
Fox.
Present.
Coons.
Present.
St. Germain.
I'm here too.
Pavlo.
Here.
Wilson. Kosar.
Here.
Weiss. Here. Burns.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 10 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Vice Chair Linting moves to adopt the minutes of April 16th meeting. Without objection, the minutes are adopted. To begin today, the committee will take up the two bills which are part of the House School Safety Package, which the committee took testimony on last week. House Bill 4225, sponsored by Representative Steele, and the H1 version of House Bill 4229, sponsored by Representative Neely. We have one card to read. This was from Jennifer Smith from the Michigan Association of School Boards. She does not wish to speak and supports the bill. Vice Chair Linting moves to report House Bill 4225 with recommendation. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Chair DeBoer.
Yes.
Representatives Linting.
Yes.
Kett.
Yes.
Fox.
Yep.
Coons.
Yes.
St. Germain.
Yes.
Pavlo.
Yes.
Wilson. Kosar.
Yes.
Weiss.
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 10 yeas, 0 nays, 0 pass. Motion prevails.
Thank you. Vice Chair Linting moves to report House Bill 4229 as substitute H1 with recommendation. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chair DeBoer.
Yes.
Representatives Linting. Yes. Kett.
Yes.
Fox.
Yep.
Coons.
Yes.
St. Germain.
Yes.
Pavlo.
Yes.
Wilson. Kosar.
Yes.
Weiss.
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 10 yeas, 0 nays, 0 pass. The motion prevails.
Thank you. The committee will now take up the two final bills which are part of the House School Safety Package for testimony. House Bill 4223, sponsored by Representative Harris, and House Bill 4315, sponsored by Representative Pavlo. Before we begin testimony, we do have substitutes for both bills. Vice Chair Linting moves to adopt the H1 substitute for House Bill 4223. This substitute ensures that members of a school crisis team will receive training under House Bill 4315. Will the clerk please call the roll on the H1 substitute?
Chair DeBoer.
Yes.
Representatives Linting,
Yes.
Paquette,
Yes.
Fox,
Yep.
Coons,
Yes.
St. Germain,
Yes.
Pavlo,
Yes.
Wilson, Kosar,
Yes.
Weiss,
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 10 yeas, 0 nays, 0 pass. The motion prevails.
Thank you. Vice Chair Linting moves to adopt the H1 substitute for House Bill 4315. This substitute requires MSP and the Office of School Safety to coordinate with the Michigan Department of Education and the AG to provide 3 tiers of training for school personnel: for school resource officers, for school crisis team members, and for all the school personnel who have regular contact with students. Could we please have that vote?
Chair DeBoer,
Yes.
Representatives Linting,
Yes.
Paquette,
Yes.
Fox,
Yep.
Coons,
Yes.
St. Germain,
Yes.
Pavlo,
Yes.
Wilson, Kosar,
Yes.
Weiss,
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 10 yeas, 0 nays, 0 pass. The motion prevails.
Thank you. Now we'll invite Representative Harris and Representative Pavlo up to the testimony table. Please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members of the committee, it's great to be here, and I appreciate you allowing us time to speak on these bills. Hopefully wrapping up our school safety package here. And, you know, the 4223 is my bill, and I'll let my partner here speak to his. But under this bill, schools would be required to develop and implement a school safety and training plan beginning in the 2026 to 2027 school year. This plan will ensure that every school resource officer, security personnel, and crisis response team and school staff members are equipped with the knowledge and skills to act decisively and effectively during times of crisis. You know, I spent 26 years in law enforcement, and a portion of that was actually as an SRO. So I spent time, and I was actually one of our sergeants in charge of our training program. So I help implement training at a local level for our schools. It is imperative to not only have great training for your school districts and your police departments, but that there is some similarity across districts and police departments across the state. So that way, if we have teachers or staff that move to different buildings, or police officers that move on to different jobs, there's a familiarity there, right? We practice fire drills in a very similar fashion, tornado drills in a very similar fashion. Having this continuity of training across the state, I think, is imperative when it comes to making sure that we're all on the same page and how we respond to each other. And, you know, unfortunately, as we look at different tragedies that have happened, and in Oakland County we had Oxford, obviously, right, which helped be a catalyst for this package. When we looked at the number of departments and people that responded to this school, Oakland County was fortunate enough to have guidance years ago where we all collaborated amongst departments, and we know how each other responds to different things, and there's that collaborative training. And we saw the benefits there on that response to Oxford and how well we work together, all the different departments. So we're hoping to continue that beyond just what we learned from Oxford, but what we've learned at shootings and other crisis issues across the country. So we think this is an imperative piece to this package, and my partner's bill actually goes into a little bit more detail. So I'll turn it over to him, and then we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, speaking from a personal standpoint, with 38 years of educational experience, I really wish that I had had these bills in effect when I was a teacher, because I really never did feel safe in the classroom. And I think I'll tell you why, because I felt like a sitting duck, actually. Even though I would lock my classroom door for safety, I also locked it so that the late student wouldn't come in without me noticing them. But there was always, wherever I taught, there was a window next to the door. And I thought somebody could break that window and just reach in and around, and the unlocked door would be opened, and then we would be defenseless there. And that's something that just always bothered me. So I always thought there should be a plan. There should be a system where we can act automatically in order to be able to help students. So that's why I'm so happy to sponsor 4315. Basically what it does, like Representative Harris said, it has the Michigan State Police with their Office of School Safety in conjunction with the Attorney General do this training for three particular levels. Number one would be the school resource officers that you just spoke about. And then they would also provide training for school crisis teams. But there would also be school training for any personnel that has anything to do with a student, any contact with a student, which would be maybe bus drivers, custodians, counselors, things like that. So, yeah, this training is very much needed, and I'm glad to be able to sponsor this bill. I guess the training would be developed by them rather than myself, because they would know a lot more about what training is absolutely needed to protect students. One of the things that I remember was, hardening of the system, so that it makes it so that a perpetrator would not want to get into a school, and maybe stronger doors, fewer windows, those types of things. So there's a lot of things that I think would be very beneficial for protecting students.
Thank you. I guess with that, Madam Chair, if we'd be happy to field any questions that anyone has.
Great. You have any questions? Representative Weiss.
Thank you both for your presentation. Districts right now currently are required to do some training preparations, lockdown drills, ALICE training, those sorts of things. Can you talk about how this is different than what's already required of districts?
Do you want to hit there, or you want me to?
Why don't you go?
All right. So right now, individual districts can kind of make up their own idea of what they would like to have for their local plan. And I don't think that this necessarily gets into a very narrow focus. We still leave it kind of a wide berth for what they can do, but we're setting a baseline training, so it's the same for every district across the state. And if you want to get more granular, that local school district or the police departments can enhance or go beyond that, right? This is just it's a foundational baseline that we want to set. And what I found when I was a school resource officer talking to other SROs across the state is we saw some difficulties with some school districts, and some police departments had a great relationship, developed fantastic training, and then others may not have. And so what we're trying to do is set that bar nice and high across the entire state, and then departments and districts can build on it from there.
It's okay if I follow up really quick?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for that. As far as the departments that are required to work on this, how is that expected? Is there one of them that's taking the lead? And then also for the local districts and the local police departments that are part of this, is there any consideration of like additional funding to help support these efforts as well?
Sure. And my understanding is, and we're going to work on some tweaks that you'll probably see in the future. So it's our plan is, or the intention is, for MSP to take the lead on this, and have basically a one-stop shop, right? So these other departments all weigh in on the training, they help develop it and whatnot, but we want one resource that places can go to, departments or districts can go to, instead of trying to, oh, do we need to go to the AG's website? Do we need to go to MSP's website? This, that. So we want to tailor it so it all ends up with MSP and the Office of School Safety. You're welcome. If there's required funding, I'm sure we're open to talking about that. And I'm not sure if one of the other bills actually addresses that.
Okay, thank you. Representative Paquette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the testimony today. After the Parkland tragedy, I was in the classroom with my students. The school district, had a protocol, and sheriff came in and they did this 8-hour training or whatever throughout several different days, and they put out their press releases and things like this afterward. But what we got at the end of it was just this protocol of how to tie our door shut, and they said, well, come down to our office to get the string. Wow. And didn't make anyone feel safer, right? Obviously, we did a lot of cultural approaches with our students and, looking at situations on their peers and, identifying threats, which, I know it mentions in here yet. It describes best practices for school personnel. And so if you're bringing bus drivers and all these different, people in contact with the children, what are some of these best practices? And, is it better than string tying doors shut, I guess? Is that what you're foreseeing? If you could break that down for me a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's a very fair question, and I have seen that. There's a conference that is very popular in the state of Michigan called the SEPLA Conference, and it's really designed towards school administrators, crisis team personnel, and school resource officers. And so there's this evolving collaboration every year, and we know if we look at just a historical perspective of crisis in schools, there's always an evolution of this, right? It's never the same, and it is truly hard, and it's probably why this package took so long. It's truly hard to anticipate everything that could happen. So we collaborate kind of like we do at some of our legislative conferences, right? We collaborate, see what the best practices have been, what successes have been, as far as at a granular detail on what that training would be. This is something that we're having MSP, the School of, or the Office of School Safety, the AG's office, MDE, collaborate on what that training should look like, and then have that be a resource for all these districts and SROs.
And I would just like to add to that, if I may. One of the trainings that I remember when I was a teacher involved a railroad that went by our school that carried tankers that had fuel and chemicals and stuff like that could be very, very dangerous. So we had a drill where you had to seal up your classroom and tape around the doors and make sure the windows were closed and things like that. So there are more fears of safety for children just than a perpetrator coming in. And I see this bill as relying on the state police and the Attorney General's office being the experts in this area, and then be able to work collaboratively with the people in education.
And again, it's, I think if we look at a regional perspective across the state, we know every region of the state's different. We have urban areas, we have rural areas, we have areas just like Rep. Pavlov said, maybe near hazmat type environments. So again, this sets a foundational baseline for departments and for school personnel to go by, but those individual regions can decide to go above and beyond that for what truly fits their area, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Representative Burns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for your testimony today. I appreciate it. So as educators, we talk a lot about differentiated instruction, and I'm curious, it looks like based on these bills that all school personnel would be included in the training, which I think is fair. But of course, we know that, school staff occupy different professional roles, and in the unfortunate event of any type of school emergency, based on their positionality, they would likely play distinct roles in responding to anything that may be unfolding. So my question is, would you envision the training for all school personnel being differentiated to some extent based on their staffing role and the role that they may play in the event of an emergency?
So in my experience, I would say yes. So I envision it as similar to how we did it in our district. You would have a baseline training, whether it happens in staff meetings or maybe an active shooter drill, things like that, where everybody is getting a baseline set of training. But then your crisis intervention team might get enhanced training, right? And they have a little bit more time to recognize things like threat assessments, how to handle all sorts of different crises, who's in charge of calling this person or addressing, this issue or whatnot. And then obviously you have school resource officers that have a whole different level of training. So I do envision different levels here, but it's kind of a baseline for each one of those levels, if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much. Thank you both.
Representative St. Germain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in Macomb County, and probably other counties in Michigan, but some of the schools contract with a private company that employs retired police officers, and their specialty is to, so to speak, be a school's resource officer. Will these bills change that opportunity? Will schools be able to contract with private companies also?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they won't be sworn officers, right? It's, I mean, there are a few districts still in Michigan where they actually have their own police force, but there's only a couple left. But this does not restrict the school district from still hiring security personnel, but it does say that there's training that they will have to go through to fit this baseline training. Okay. So we make sure that people are familiar with how law enforcement area will respond, what their roles are, and the difference between them being now in a security type setting versus a law enforcement type setting. And there's differences on who has what responsibility and what their authorities are as well. So this training will help differentiate that as well.
Okay. So they would, I mean, they do their own training, obviously, so they would have to also do the MSP training?
Yes.
Okay, both. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have a few cards here. We have Bob Kufkin from the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals. He does not wish to speak, and he supports the bill. We have Paul Stankiewicz from the Michigan Catholic Conference. He does not wish to speak, but he supports the bill. Brian Broderick from the Michigan Association of Non-Public Schools. He does not wish to speak and supports the bill. And it's just heartwarming. You know, I come out of education, and to have people lean into these problems from all different backgrounds, and that's it's so interesting. In the legislature, you get people from all different occupations coming together to circle around a problem to say, how can we come up with a better way? And we kind of put down the silos, and we all lean into it and try to figure out what can we do better, and where did the communication break down, where did the different groups break down, and how can we can, from a teaching perspective, from a law enforcement perspective. And it's not like you're just walking into this problem having never thought about it and just read about it in a book in a class somewhere, but you were the boots on the ground, experiencing the classroom and the issues of law enforcement, and being in the classroom as a teacher. And so the experience comes with wisdom, and that is just a priceless gift to the state, I think. And you can tell from the questions, people come from different backgrounds, and spouses in professions, and everything comes together, and we really just want to do our best to help protect those children all across the state of Michigan. So thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your questions, and we appreciate all of that. So now we're going to move to the UP and education issues there with the ICE. So thank you. So Representative oops, I'm doing the wrong thing.
You're good. No, that's the bill right now. So.
Oh, this is, oh, yeah. So I'm going to this. So now the committee is going to take testimony on House Bill 4345, sponsored by Representative Cavett. So if you'd like to come forward, Representative, we welcome him, and take a seat. Begin when you're ready. We appreciate all that you have gone through, and we appreciate your advocacy for the kids.
Yes,
in schools.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. I really appreciate you being here. I'm here today to testify in support of House Bill 4345, which ultimately gives local schools affected by the ice storm the flexibility to decide whether they need to extend the school year into July. Many of you have heard, but unfortunately a lot do not know, that we had a once-in-a-generation ice storm in northern Michigan that affected 300,000 people without power. I was personally without power for 8 days. People were not able to get out of their homes due to the fallen trees on the roads, power lines, radio towers. There was no radio communications. No fuel could get into the area. So it was quite a mess up there for still going on 20 days. We have families that have been without power for over 20 days now, and it's still ongoing. But we were fortunate that mutual aid went out. We had crews from all over the state and country, many with hurricane recovery experience. They were saying this storm was worse than anything they had worked before. It was so widespread. To kind of put that into perspective, Great Lakes Energy's worst storm ever took out 160 electrical poles. This storm was 2,800 poles. Presque and Electric and Gas lost all of their substations. It wasn't just a pole and line issue for them. They were literally re-engineering and putting back together the grid for over a 6 to 8 county area. They had to do a complete regrid, engineering it on the fly. A couple quotes. We had the Mount Morenci County, which was one of the hardest struck areas, is also the highest child poverty county in the state. That's according to the superintendent there, Katie Mikowski. Lewiston, Joburg schools have already had over 190 inches of snow this year, so they have days that they have to make up already. To put that in perspective, that's about 16 feet of snow that they've had there in Johannesburg, Lewiston. I think this bill, it helps reach out to our northern Michigan families. A lot of people don't understand exactly what are special issues up there, but it protects local control. It's common sense government. It's responsible use of authority. It's fiscally responsible, and it's a good voice for rural Michigan. And, I just think this is a fair and a practical solution to an extraordinary situation, and I would ask everybody to vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cavett. One of the problems with all the power out is there's no way to get the story out either. So really nobody cares about what's happening in the UP, and that's the biggest tragedy. That's what it feels like when you're in the UP and you don't have water because you don't have power, right? Because most of it has to be pumped up, right?
We were out power without 8 days also. I live across the street from a lake, and we were using lake water for the toilet flush. Not to be crude, but there's tens of thousands of people are in the same situation.
Yeah. Amazing. Does anyone have a question? Oh, where are we? Oh, Representative Kosar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill forward. I had a conversation last week. The Gaylord superintendent was down here. I'm sure you met with her. By the way, she personally mentioned you by name and said how helpful you were being up there. So
thank you. Appreciate
thank
that.
you for that. My question is, did you have any other conversations with superintendents up there is this the only measure they need in terms of school, or are they looking for any other assistance in any other levels in terms of education?
That's to be determined in the future. Right now, we just don't want them to be penalized for the amount of days they've missed. Some of the schools, Lewiston, Joburg's out 20 days without power. So yes, Ms. Mikowski coincidentally is the head of the Superintendent's Association from the district. So we were relying heavily on her for some of their needs.
Okay, just want to make sure we're giving them everything they need because it's a difficult time for
we
them.
might be back, their representative. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Fox.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. And I speak as a former Northern Michigan principal as I share this. 3 of my kids graduated from Northern Michigan's high school there. And I will just say this, that the further north you go in Michigan, the better they know how to take care of snow and ice. And I say that from someone who's lived the length of Michigan. At least the lower peninsula. I did spend some time in the upper peninsula too. I guess my statement is very simple. It seems like if we could do what we did for the pandemic, we certainly ought to be able to do this, for our state and for our students in northern Michigan. And my question is, wouldn't this also be helpful because I know that northern Michigan runs on tourism? Wouldn't this be helpful to have all those students available for working?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Representative Fox. We're going to leave that up to the local school districts. This bill does not eliminate it. It leaves it up to the local school districts to do what they think is best for their students. So, of course, a lot of them work summer jobs.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Weiss.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Cavett. Thank you for being here and advocating for your district. We're down in lower Michigan. We've just heard tales and seen pictures, and I can't imagine what it's been like to have to live through that.
The DNR, just sorry to interrupt, the DNR has lost 1 million acres in forest land, just to put that in perspective also.
Yeah, that's insane. I appreciate you bringing this up, and I know obviously what has happened in the Gaylord area in your district is extremely rare event. But I do know also that there have been in the past, and unfortunately will continue to be, other severe weather events, impact events that are going to happen in the state that are going to call for state emergencies and lead to school closings. I wonder if you had any thought around, I know your bill is very specific to what just happened, which I think is appropriate, but maybe making it even like more broad so we don't have to revisit this every time something like this were to happen. If there is another major emergency, if there's a major state emergency, that we're giving that local control back to districts.
Well, that would be something we could work on, but time is of the essence on this. So we really just, the more permanent of a fix, the more controversial it gets, the more stakeholders are involved. So we just really need to hold those students harmless and hold our districts harmless.
I agree with that. Just something to consider moving forward. But
thank you, Representative.
Yes, thank you. And we have a testimony card, or the cards here. John Sevenson from the Michigan Association of Intermediate School Administrators does not wish to speak, supports the bill. Jennifer Smith from the Michigan Association of School Boards does not wish to speak, but supports the bill. Matthew Schuler from the Michigan Association of Superintendents does not wish to speak, supports the bill. Andy Newman from the Michigan Education Association does not wish to speak and supports the bill. I've heard from, I think you maybe told me that some of these people that came up who have fought hurricanes and everything said that this devastation was like a Category 5 hurricane.
We had gale force winds between 80 and 90 miles an hour for 3 days with sleeting rain for 3 days. A lot of the folks, when you have a tornado happens, it's very localized. You can usually go to a community 10 miles away. But there was nothing available from, Petoskey to Alpena was just devastated. There was you couldn't travel on the roads. If you did, you couldn't find fuel. A lot of people were having to drive south. I drove 80 miles south, just south of Grayling, we ran out of fuel. So it was 80 miles before I found an open gas station.
So, when you think about the devastation of hurricanes and then you put sub-zero temperatures on top of that, no access to water, and it's crushing. So, we thank you for your testimony and for your initiative in doing this, and we will address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee.
Yes. Thank you. So now to conclude today's agenda, the committee will take testimony on House Bill 4141, sponsored by Representative Tisdale. Representative Tisdale is joined by Reverend Casey Noce, who is a teacher at the Northville Christian School. Welcome to the House Education and Workforce Committee. Glad you're already taking a seat, and you can begin when you are ready.
Thank you very much, Chair DeBoer and members of the committee. We just have to go through this today, so everybody relax. No, this is a part of what I've been looking at over the last 2 years, and been working very closely with my legislative director, Kevin Rose, who's here, and also very closely with Senator John Cherry. We've been discussing this since last summer. He's got a couple of daughters that are entering into this potential cell phone stage, and Senator Cherry couldn't be here, but Nick Haas, his chief of staff, has joined us, and thank you, Nick. This is a map. It's been up for some time now, so you've had a chance to read it. Michigan is not the only state. I'm not the only individual that's thought this is important. This was from the Wall Street Journal this year. I think it's interesting. Virginia is a Republican governor and a Democratic-led legislature, and just on April 2nd, they just passed or put into place legislation, and this would call for a bell-to-bell prohibition on cell phone use in all schools. So it's a much tighter restriction than what we're proposing here. Professor Jonathan Haidt out of New York University has been writing and studying this and doing research for 7 years on this subject. He'll tell you that we are in our 13th year of a healthcare crisis among teen and tween girls in particular. And not only is it a mental health crisis, but it has definite impact on their learning ability as well. This is the November, it says October, it was published in November issue of The Atlantic. And this is by a professor from Columbia University, an English professor at Columbia University. Elite students coming into Columbia University haven't developed the attention span or the personal discipline to read a book. They can't read a book. And this is at our elite university, so and it's the impact that my next guest via Zoom, licensed counselor Jennifer Wilson, hopefully Jennifer is still with us there, can talk about the impacts of social media and cell phone use on the brain. Jennifer.
Great. Good morning, Chair DeBauer and the committee members. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I've served as an educator and a counselor in Michigan for over 20 years, and I am honored to speak in support of Whitmer's proposal to limit cell phone use in K-12 classrooms and support the House Bill 4141 that's being introduced by Representative Mark Tisdale. So my testimony today isn't about banning technology. I absolutely value it and use it daily. But powerful devices in the hands of developing brains without proper guardrails does come at a cost. Loss of focus, engagement, connection, learning, social emotional well-being. The impact this bill will protect the development of our students' brains. Protecting the brain touches everything in the students' lives. Throughout my career working with students, I've seen firsthand how the growing presence of cell phones and social media has caused negative impacts on the brain. The constant digital distractions are stealing time from learning, building skills, connecting with others in real life, and just simply being present. Unrestricted cell phone access undermines students' ability to thrive because they are bombarded with trying to manage an unprecedented, powerful source of distraction and emotional stimulation at a time when their brains are least equipped to manage it. So whether a student is checking social media, doom scrolling on the short reels and the clips, streaming sports or movies, or they just feel a message notification, their attention is fractured. The brain stays in a state of constant shifting, unable to focus, process, or retain as it could. During adolescence, the brain is rapidly rewiring, especially in the areas tied to emotional regulation and processing. The emotional center of the brain, the limbic system, develops early. So this is interesting. So making adolescents more sensitive to emotions and social feedback. But the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning, learning, self-control, logic, and judgment develops later. This natural imbalance makes it harder for teens to manage emotions, resist impulses, and stay focused. So it's no surprise that students will struggle to resist accessing and using their phones. The constant stimulus decreases executive functioning, memory, emotional regulation. Excessive use can rewire the brain, making it hard to concentrate and increase impulsive behaviors. The brain becomes conditioned to seek out the dopamine surges from social media and the technology itself, making it increasingly difficult to regulate use and making adolescents especially vulnerable to addiction because, again, that frontal lobe is not developing at the same rate as the limbic system. Teachers see the fallout every day: glazed eyes, constant screen checking, anxiety all day, the rush to get back to phones instead of engaging with learning. I've seen these problems increasingly become on a daily issues for many students. Even the mere presence of a phone, not even using it, on the table, on the desk, has been shown to reduce focus and increase anxiety as well. I've worked with many students who've been anxious, depressed, and even paranoid, caught between that fear of rejection and that hope of being accepted due to social media. The pressure to stay visible, to keep up there, to be relevant online is more than a distraction, and it can certainly turn into emotional burden. Digital stress at times can be so severe that it keeps students stuck in survival mode. It can activate what we call the amygdala response, which is an automatic emotional reaction to protect us. But this now sends the student into fight, flight, or freeze, which again just distracts and pulls away from that prefrontal cortex. So now they're again not in that thinking side, which is still trying to develop and is behind the limbic system. So the very skills that we want them to develop are basically being short-circuited by these constant distractions. I do appreciate this bill very much because it's evident that our schools and our students need protection that it provides. This bill also offers needed support for establishing and enforcing healthy cell phone boundaries for schools as well. It gives educators the backing they need to shift the culture around phones, not through individual enforcement alone, but through consistent shared expectations. That's why involvement at the state level matters, not only in setting policy, but in providing schools with the structure and schools to implement it well. Thankfully, we're not alone. As you saw in that graphic, there's many states that are addressing it. This is catching wind. This is definitely on the minds of many. Many states and many countries have already implemented this just to protect the brain development. I'm excited that you'll get to hear from Avondale School Superintendent Dr. Schwartz in a bit. Avondale has done amazing and diligent work to set up the standard on how cell phone restriction is done well. They really have. They were caring, firm, united, and they engaged parent support in their approach. So I'm excited for you to hear from them. In all of this, and all of these challenges, we do have an opportunity to educate students and families why setting boundaries, providing some restrictions on cell phone is vital for their brain health. We can use education itself to make this shift, and there's no cost to protect the students' brains from distractions. So thank you so much. We can't afford to wait for more evidence to confirm what we already know. Learning and brain health is being compromised. Let's align policy with research and evidence. Let's support the educators who care so much and give of themselves so each day. Let's give our students the gift of focus, deep learning, and a healthier future. Thanks for your time and commitment to the Michigan students. Lastly, Kevin is going to be sending out, I put together a document on one big link that provides a lot of resources, articles, and just very recent. Almost everything I put on this document, probably 20 things, is within the last year, evidence dating, and other happenings around this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And she came to my office on an advocacy day 2 years ago. I roped her into the cell phone thing, and we've been passing notes in class ever since. So I have with me from Northville, Mr. Casey Noce, and take it away.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to testify in favor of this House Bill 4141. I think this will be the most significant piece of legislation pertaining to education that'll be passed here in the last 30 years. I'll get back to that. My name's Casey Noce. I teach history and Bible, 7th and 8th grade history and Bible at Northville Christian Schools. And this year I have voluntarily added to my portfolio Smartphone Czar. This role was born after we took a survey of our students. We wanted to see where they were at with their cell phone habits, social media usage. Within the survey was a series of questions, among which two built a statistic that really surprised me. Number one, does your smartphone have a negative impact on you? 80% of our middle school students answered in the negative. 80% of our students said, no, my smartphone does not have a negative, or not have a negative impact on me. But paired with the second question, it took on a whole new meaning. The second of the two questions was, does your smartphone have a negative impact on your friends? Again, the answer was 80%, this time in the affirmative. 80% said, yes, cell phones have a negative impact on my friends. What does it tell us? It tells us that there is a problem. The students notice it in their friends. They don't notice it in themselves. I have since really jumped headfirst into this idea of getting smartphones out of the schools. I've given lectures to parents. I've led our student government in creating different initiatives to change the culture, at least in our school, so that the younger kids don't think smartphones are cool. Currently, they're working on a no smartphone month of May. The last month of the school year, we're just going to do no smartphones and try and incentivize that with some fun stuff. We post informational posters around the school, which is really fun. I brought two of them with me. I just printed them. One, just as a big brain, a little brain, smartphones make your brain smaller. One of them says, dumb phone equals smart kid, which I like that too. A dumb phone referring to like a flip phone, not with access to the internet. One saying, you snooze, you win. If you put your phone by your bed, it's going to negatively impact your sleep, and we want our kids to be able to sleep at night rather than be on their phone all night, which is also going to impact their grade. The students in our middle school also hold meetings with the younger grades to encourage them not to use smartphones, and I've watched it as these older students tell the younger kids why this is negative, why it's going to impact you in a bad way. We often cite the wait until 8th movement, which encourages parents not to buy smartphones for their children until 8th grade. But as far as policies go, our school is a no-phone zone. We use paper and books at our school. The students that do bring their phones check it into the office where it can only be picked up on the way out of the building. This policy is incredibly effective. Kids seldomly forget to turn them into the office, and this allows students a phone-free day where they can learn to socialize like normal kids and learn in the classroom uninhibited by their smartphone. Our students find great success in their high schools. Many of them are graduating top of their class and going on to great academic success. I could name all the universities, all the schools that they graduate from. We have a high level of academic success from our school, and I think it is really due to a few reasons, but one is we don't have smartphones in the classroom. They can actually learn. I've taught in both schools that allow smartphones in the classroom and that don't, and I can say the difference is obvious. When cell phones are not prohibited, it's impossible to teach. Even the most diligent teacher struggles to battle the unlimited entertainment a phone has to offer. Cell phones keep students from learning, and before they know it, it's too late. Class is dismissed. Many of you on the board are also, or on this committee, are also former teachers. If you were a former teacher, awesome, yeah. I figured the majority. You know how difficult it is to command the attention of a room of high schoolers or middle schoolers without a phone. It is impossible to do so with phones in the classroom. And you also know the pressure of being a teacher who offers some sort of accommodation, like to be the cool teacher. All right, I'll let you use the phone at the end of instructional time. How about that? Like there is a pressure there to be a teacher who kind of is, understands the kids. You kind of speak their language, you get on their level. And so this is why a lot of the school policies don't work, at least the schools that I've been involved in, because it's kind of left up to the teacher to decide. And they can't actually implement it because there is that social pressure of being a teacher. Anyways, I said that this legislation would be the most significant piece of legislation pertaining to education the past 30 years in Michigan. Public Act 140 of 1993, the year I was born, banned, and I've been teaching for 10 years too, banned the use of tobacco products in school. Within 20 years, smoking was outlawed in all public places. At the time, there were mixed opinions on the dangers of tobacco. What was the government doing getting involved in our freedoms again? There was public pushback, but to quote Tolkien, but they were all of them deceived. The science was clear, smoking kills. With rates of anxiety and depression skyrocketing in our teens since smartphones have become ubiquitous and rates of literacy declining since phones have been allowed into classrooms, we can say confidently that smartphones are dangerous and destructive for our students and that they do not belong in Michigan schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Casey. My next guest is a associate principal at Traverse City West High School. In September of 2023, Representative O'Neill and I had the chance to participate in a panel discussion up there, and then after we were done, we ran over to Traverse City West to see what they were doing with their cell phone activity. So without further ado, Mr. Andy Wares, Associate Principal, Traverse City West High School. Looking very professional today.
Yeah, thank you. I dressed up for it and all. Yeah, thanks for inviting me into this. We've had a unique experience here at West Senior High implementing this. Before there was a lot of guidance across the state of what this might look like. I think as a staff, we noticed a real acute change when kids were coming back out of COVID into the building around skills related to doing school. And we weren't quite sure what all went into the makeup of that. We suspected COVID, maybe some habits that happened over COVID, parents working, kids on learning screens with something always scrolling in the background, whether that's a video game or a group chat with other friends. But what we noticed when they came back to school was, like has already been brought up here, a real shift in students' ability to focus and demonstrate some stamina in a learning setting. I think what was happening is kids were constantly on their phones, and the fun that they were having in the digital spaces during COVID, they stayed in, and that subtext in a learning environment isn't super obvious, certainly to someone my age who, like, smartphones came around when I was already gray. But I think what was happening in those moments was there were a lot of pressures being put on kids in a learning space to split their attention between multiple things, like the pictures that people are taking and possibly putting into small group chats, the pictures that people are taking about teachers and the commentary that's going on about this teacher and this learning moment. And then also like the stuff that's happening across the building and other pockets of learning, or even the people who are trying to arrange like a meetup in a bathroom or out on an athletic field where good things tend not to happen. And so after a bit of that, credit to our teaching staff, they asked the board to consider the adoption of a cell phone policy. So in Traverse City area public schools, what we started out with was a policy that was sort of aimed at making sure that in the learning environment that kids weren't on their phones at all, so that we could have kids whose brains are present for learning. And we wrote some policy around neither seen nor heard was key language. And then we differentiated how that was rolled out across some of our schools. So in the elementary level and at the middle school level, it's just a way for the day. But at our high school level, students have their phones in the spaces between our classes. We have a 6-period day. We have kids who engage in dual enrollment. Some of that dual enrollment's online, some of it's at different locations. We have kids going to and from Career Technical Center. And so what we did is we put these like wall cubbies, like a pocket thing for everyone to put their phone into. We take attendance against the presence of phones in those pockets. And then if we have an issue where a kid's not using their phone appropriately, or if they're not handing that over, following the plan, we have a white envelope that kids sort of write their name on, they put it in, and they can pick their phone up at the end of the day. And what we've found is once we got through the transition of implementation, there wasn't much fuss at all. We're a school of around 1,500 kids, and I would say we have probably less than 15 kids who habitually struggle to override some obstinacy related to not being in control of their phone. And what we've seen in terms of like learning in the classroom is like, you can walk around as a principal. I walk into classrooms all the time, and my viewpoint is usually from the back of the room, which is a viewpoint that a teacher can't often see. So it was really easy for me to pick out kids on their phones when they were on their phones all the time. And I can tell you that I just don't see kids on their phones anymore. And that's reflected also in like school-wide discipline. We don't have major discipline events that are coming out of like unsurveilled spaces really at all anymore. We used to like struggle with fight clubs and things like that would lead to like the type of school discipline that gets to a superintendent or a delegate of a superintendent with some regularity coming out of COVID. We also would have kids who had stolen, say, like a dab pen or something like that, and brought some marijuana to school and wanted to gain the attention of their peers by bringing them into that. We were struggling with more of that than we ever had. Since we've managed cell phones, we've seen a lot of that fade away. And at the same time, especially this year, our second year, we're noticing like kids, like our freshman cohort at the end of first semester, there were less than 15 kids who had failed one of their core classes. It's a significant difference from where we were when we were coming out of COVID, and all that we were doing was responding to failure interventions and remediation and trying to get kids back up. And I'm not suggesting that that's all traces back to cell phones, but I think cell phones play a big part, because back to the brain science, what I observe of kids is especially the part about when a kid gets escalated, if they feel threatened. That notion that when the school day is over that I used to enjoy, and when I got to go home, I sort of got to relax and I didn't have to worry what people were saying about me at school when I was an adolescent, that never stops for kids. That commentary that started at school gets chewed on over and over and over again, and it just becomes these hidden spaces where kids can seek the attention of peers. And kids are super aware of when someone's creating a picture or a video of them, and they know that it's likely they're being made fun of, which leads to a rise in high school drama that was really, really difficult for a while to manage. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate that y'all are considering this.
All right. Thank you very much, Andy. And then last but not least, Dr. James.
Excuse me, Representative Tisdale. I know we talked about questions at the end. I have a representative with a burning question for this gentleman.
Okay. Andy, hang in there for a second for answer questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, sir, for staying on the question. It's a bit of an open-ended question. Have there been any parents with pushback on security concerns? School safety, we just had testimony on that. It's a related issue. Has anybody pushed back and said, nope, I want my kids to be able to reach out, and I want to be able to reach my kids? Has that been and how is that question solved?
Yeah, that's a question that pops up, I would say, like as at an outlier level of the feedback that we get from parents. We don't hear much of it at all, but it has popped up a little bit, and I think it's a fair question. But I think if you were to talk to anyone who's part of an emergency response planning effort for public schools, having kids reach out to their parents immediately before those people are able to come in and execute a plan isn't part of their plan. So we try to. I totally get where it comes from. I don't think that personally, and these decisions around these considerations are definitely above my role in our organization. But I don't see that outweighing the merit of it in terms of supporting classroom learning. And I think if a district is able to hold on to some really good talking points around that it gives you something to stand on when you're having those conversations with colleagues at a board level, with parents, with other people in the community who are wondering about that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I can talk about the National Center for School Safety, their view on that. When we
Please do. I'd like to learn more about that.
When we get to the questions, we'll get to that. Next, we've got waiting. Dr. James Schwartz is the superintendent of Avondale Schools in Auburn Hills. They've had a program at their middle school that was expanded to the high school. Dr. Schwartz, take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yep. Very good. All right. I'm joined with Dr. Katie Gomez, who is our principal at Avondale Middle School. And we sit here in support of HB 4141. We think this is a critical piece of legislation, much for the reasons that you heard. Much of our experiences historically have been much that Andy had pointed out in terms of some of the disciplinary situations that cell phones have created, as well as the engagement issues in the school. So much so that 2 years ago, we also implemented call it a no phone policy at our middle school, where students place their phones in a pouch as they enter the building. It's a pouch that they can decorate, they can, create some ownership with. They carry it with them through the day, but it is locked in a pouch magnetically. So they come into the building, they put the phone in the case, it becomes magnetized, closed. They carry it with them. When they leave for the day, they unmagnetize it, they can open it up, take it out. It's a pretty simple and easy process. And they've all gotten accustomed to it right off the bat, really easily. And Dr. Gomez is going to share some of the data because she's really the architect of the policy and consequently also the data gatherer of, how this has impacted the environment, with some numbers and some data. But I will say that, there's when you look at the benefits of a cell phone ban in the school, there's a number of benefits. So I spoke about briefly engagement, student engagement in the classroom. We heard testimony this morning about, distractions and always having that phone there and the addiction to have that phone in their palm of their hand, and that gets eliminated. And they're greater engaged in the class instruction. There's a greater sense of participation in the class, consequently, because of that. We do know, and we do have data to support that student achievement has gone up because of the lack of those distractions in the classroom. We know, and as you heard testimony on, that it positively affects discipline. Discipline referrals, major discipline referrals. We've seen a drastic decrease in cyberbullying through the school day because of always having that phone. Students have been apt to, egg each other on and exchange barbs and so on through the day that erupts into fights in the bathroom during passing times and things of those nature. Yeah. So that has been eliminated, frankly, because of the fact that they don't have access to do that anymore. Social skills. Let me speak to that. Our kids have been growing up with these cell phones in the palm of their hand. One hand had a pacifier, the other hand had a phone. I mean, that's how young some of these kids have had a phone. And so consequently, they haven't learned to socialize. And it's been amazing to see in the 2 years that we've not had the phones in the lunchroom, where we traditionally saw kids sitting around a table, all quiet and texting. Now, kids have to actually converse and learn social cues. And we had to reestablish, and kids had to learn that actually in middle school. We had advisory periods that taught social skills. How do I read socials? How do I read social cues? How do I understand gestures? How do I understand the nuances of being able to socialize? Because frankly, with phones, kids never learned it. Their mode of communication with each other largely is electronic. And it's amazing when you take that away, they actually have to be human and converse. We heard a little bit about parents and emergency situations. Look, we all went up through school with no phones, and we all went just fine. And there's a reassurance with parents, and Katie and our staff at the middle school have done a great job with having forums with parents before we implemented a policy about, look, if you need to get a message to your child, we have somebody actually in the office that will answer the phone, take the message, and get it to your child. We eliminated the voicemail system, where parents get caught up and don't talk to a human. So we thought it's imperative, because that was a concern of parents rolling out, that they're able to get messages to their kids and so on. And so we do that. We have, just like when we came through school, the secretary would bring down a message or so on as you needed it. We know in emergency situations where you have to evacuate the building or other types of emergencies, that first responders have certainly testified that cell phones have been a problem. They jam up 911 lines when there is an emergency. We have parents that are disrupting an evacuation process because their kids are texting. Kids are not able to get out of harm's way because they're too busy being on their phone instead of following directions. These are all testimonies by first responders that echo the support for this type of legislation, because in an emergency situation, phones are a deterrent to getting kids to a safe place quickly. I mean, the reasons are innumerable. Engagement, participation, achievement, discipline, cyberbullying, social skills, emergency response. And that's the short list of benefits to legislation like this that other states have seen. So I'm going to turn it over briefly to Katie to share some of the data that she's collected with this system at the middle school.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartz. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Can everybody hear me? I'm kind of far away.
If you could move a little closer to the microphone. There you go.
All right. Hi. So we're really pleased with the results that we've had. We do use the pouches, which also my assistant principal and I stand at the door every morning and greet all the students and make sure they have their pouch and double check those things. And we found, I know when we first implemented it, an assistant superintendent came to our building and she came in where all the students were gathered in the morning and she said, "It's so loud in here. Is everything okay?" And I was like, "No, they're just talking to each other. Like that's what they do in the morning." So just to see that engagement, not just in academically, but with one another. So middle schoolers, learning how to be people together. So I have sort of two buckets of data that I want to share with you. First, our academic achievement data that's very specific to Avondale Middle School. When I came into Avondale Middle School and coming out of COVID, Avondale Middle School was struggling a little bit, and we were a targeted support school. So we've moved out of that in the time since we've implemented the honor pouches. Our overall index went from 50.89 out of 100 to 73. So it's a 20 plus point increase. Growth index went from 55 to 76, again, a 20-point increase. These are for their state testing scores, so we see just incredible improvement. Our proficiency increased about 6-7 points, so from 47 to 54. And then our school quality overall student success index went from 51 to 81, so a 30-point increase there. So that's just like an incredible shift in achievement in our building. Anecdotally from my staff, you will hear any staff member would swear upon the cell phone ban, and they love the pouches because it's no longer, there's no power struggle with my staff. There's no like, hey, you have your phone out, like put your phone away, like having all these conversations. So much of the interaction time that my staff was having with students was around cell phones, like trying to give them warnings, kind of like what the other gentleman mentioned with the like cool factor, right? Like get like allowing or not allowing, like those decision-making pieces. Like we don't even ask our staff. If the staff sees the phone, they send us an email or make a phone call, and when an administrator comes down and gets the phone, we don't even have our staff take them or interact with the phones like at all. And then behaviorally, we had a huge shift as well. We had a 2/3 reduction in fighting in our building, and so that's a significant decrease. We had sort of a lot of fights, a lot of 30 seconds in the bathroom, a lot of slapboxing kind of things, arranged fighting where kids knew they were going to fight each other, all phone related, because that's how they were making arrangements. I already mentioned that we eliminated that power struggle with staff. So there was a lot of referrals and insubordination around phones that has now been alleviated. And in year one, our phone violations were cut in half. So the documented phone violations that we had, but over the 2-year time period, we went from about 1 or 2 phone violations a day to 1 to 2 phone violations a week, which sounds like maybe that's not a huge change, except for before our data show that we were logging phone violations after kids had gotten warnings and then they refused to put a phone away. So there was a lot of additional phone usage that was being curtailed with a warning. And now every time a kid has a phone, it's being documented. So it's a clear reduction in those types of distractions that are not just distractions for students, but also clear distractions for instructors. So if a teacher is spending, if teachers are spending, if we have 1 to 2 a day of kids that are getting in trouble, but teachers are warning, 4 or 5 kids a class period, those just it's interrupted instruction as well. So we're just pleased with our phone policy. We had very little parent kickback. We had meetings with parents, explained to them what we were looking to do. explain to them our emergency protocols in a middle school level. Like if the parents would say, well, if my kid's being picked on, I want to know right away. Well, it's like, well, we want to know too. So like they need to come to the office and report that. And then we will get in touch with you and we will work on solving that issue. And they say, if my kid is sick, like, I want to know right away. It's like, well, we want to know too. Like, I don't want your kid passing out in a bathroom or throwing up by themselves in a restroom. Like, and then you come up to the school and don't know which restroom they're in or where they are. I want them to come to our clinic and we will help them. Like, we want to help your child. Like, so a lot of the reasons we were able to sort of talk through with parents. One of the things we do like about the pouches, I will say, is that it does allow, for parents to track their children. I know that sounds kind of, dystopian, but they are able to, if the kids have Life 360 or Find My or whatever, in a real emergency, like the kind of unthinkable emergency that your previous bills were addressing, a parent's able to see if their child is evacuating the building, because that is still trackable. So that's a pretty cool feature, because the phone is still in the pouch. But the parents can see that little dot moving, out of the building, which can provided a lot of.
Yeah, I'm going to ask for a wrap up here, because I know we've got some questions that we'd like to get to. But thank you very much. That's fantastic info.
Thank you so much for the
Please hang around in case there are questions.
Sure.
Yes, thank you so much. First question, Representative Kosar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I appreciate the spirit of the bill. I think next to good morning, the most common thing I said when I was in the classroom was put your phone away. So I can appreciate that. I know also Northville Public Schools they no longer allow cell phones in K-8, and every bit of feedback I've gotten from pretty much anybody in the community has been resoundingly positive. My question is, schools always want to make sure they are following the law. I couldn't find it in your bill, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Is there any distinction to make sure that school-issued devices are exempt? So like Chromebooks, things like that.
We have an H1 sub on that, and some of this came from Representative Breen, but there are two changes in the sub. We've eliminated the grade numbers and because Novi, for example, has K through 6. So we've gone elementary, middle school, and high school, and then we've included medically necessary devices and school-issued or school-owned devices that are being used in the classroom.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Representative Fox. Oh, Paquette, sorry.
You can jump in there. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the testimony. Educators are tasked with building 21st century skills in very non-21st century environments, right? Something bad happens, and then we lock up windows, we close doors, all of this. And this is, a huge struggle, especially the school that I was blessed to be able to work at. But as we hear with testimony, every single school has been approaching this challenge. I loved what you were describing, the interaction you had with students. This wouldn't happen if we just banned things from the state standpoint, in my estimation. At my school, we as teachers, we created our own disciplinary system that actually allowed all of our kids had one-to-one MacBooks as well, so that was a distraction. But we were tasked with, teaching young people how to use these things. The counselor mentioned that kids are anxious around seeing a phone. Well, if a kid is anxious around a body of water because they can't swim, you teach the child how to swim. And so this is where, as schools approach these problems, I wonder how we can maybe address it culturally. So, at our school, we had kids level up in a way, because how do you get kids engaged in learning? How do you get them to, the stats that were up there of kids not being able to read? Well, they need to fail as well. They failed in my class, and they realized they weren't going to pass unless they had the abilities to, read or comprehend, high-level texts. And so when they had this clear problem that they weren't going to pass, they had to address the predicaments that were keeping them from getting there. And so, when every challenge is out there, it presents an opportunity. When the ban came down from our district on phones, our school had to modify our disciplinary program that allowed kids who established a track record of using their phone wisely or being able to have it. Other kids are like, well, I want to get there as well. How do I get there? Well, here are the steps. And so I see this as limiting. I get the K-5, element and maybe middle school too, but why does the state have to interfere with the great, plans that schools are developing, and also as the testimony described, there are these great opportunities to talk about 21st century skills with kids.
There's a phenomenon called a collective action trap. And I think, as you heard with Jennifer Wilson talking about how these phones are an impediment while the brain is developing. But in this collective action trap, it's the momentum or the inertia of the behaviors of those around us suck us in. There are 886 school districts in the state of Michigan. If we wait for all 886 to come up with a program, we're going to be waiting a long time. So all I'm trying to do is, I'm not, like Virginia indicated, they've got a bell-to-bell exclusion, period. We're just trying to establish a baseline for the school districts to operate off of, and then they can be as creative within those baseline guidelines, or as strict, more strict. So again, there's 56 intermediate school districts, 537 local school districts, 293 charter and academy administrative entities. And we want to break that collective action cycle. Mr. Paquette, you're the only one that doesn't allow us to have a phone in class. As Casey was talking about that pushback, that pressure from the students. Mom, I need to get a smartphone. I'm the only one at school that doesn't have one. And so if we can break that cycle, that collective action trap, that gives people the room to go in and implement what's best for the students.
And just a quick follow-up, if I may. So if there's a school that is breaking the law and allowing our disciplinary system to take place, what are the penalties? Are we going to go to jail?
I haven't put penalties in this, but that's something that we could address through a purse string issue, whatever. But the point is, I've been working with the Oakland County Intermediate School District for almost 2 years on this. 28 superintendents. That's how I got to meet Dr. Schwartz. These are professionals. They're bright people. They want to do what's best for their kids, and the legislation I'm promoting is going to give them room to do that without that. Gosh, you're the only one.
Representative Fox.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the broad spectrum of testimony. Really good to have it from so many different angles.
And people that are actually doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to throw my hat in the ring, too. I experienced the same thing as a K-12 administrator with schools without cell phones. It really makes a difference academically, socially, and in so many ways. So I just have two questions. One is, should we prohibit cell phones in the legislature, too? Would that be helpful for us? And the other one is, do you think prohibiting cell phones will help us move from number 4?
I'll let Casey answer that last question.
Yes, it will definitely help us. It will help us educate our students. And so if you trust that the Michigan teachers are among some of the best in the nation, which I was public educated my entire way through school, I believe that 100%. We have amazing teachers in Michigan. If you believe in the teachers in Michigan, all we need to do is get the phone out of the faces of the students, and we'll see our students do better.
Yeah. And I think Principal Gomez's testimony indicated that significant 15, 20, 30 percentage point rises in many of the increases in many of the metrics. Again, I became at the middle school. It's a bell-to-bell exclusion. I'm not sure what Dr. Schwartz and the school district's high school expansion is. But back to Rep. Kuntz's question a little bit, the National Center for School Safety, and Dr. Schwartz talked about this. The last thing you want is for your kids to be fumbling, reaching, trying to get in connection with their parents or anyone else, 911, in the event of an actual emergency. You want them solely focused on the trained professional that's at the head of the classroom. You do not want cell phone ringers going off behind a closed door, making aware the presence of students to an active shooter that's wandering the halls. Doors are not bulletproof. You do not want 100 or more parents showing up at the schools in their cars when first responders are trying to get there. And those are the issues. And you take a look at Oxford, which is just north of my district, the Oxford shooting. The 911 system was flooded. The cell system was flooded. So that access became unavailable. And many parents, I get it, want to have contact in the event of an emergency. But talking to you 6 miles away from the site of the emergency does not enhance their safety. And that's the part that has to be reeled back in again. And we got to let the system, let the professionals do their jobs, and then every program that I've spoken to has some opportunity for the kids to then reach out to their own parents.
Vice Chair Linting.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. This has been very informative and helpful, and I do see this as a real issue. The last gentleman that testified said we all went to school without smartphones and we survived, and I'm kind of calling myself out here.
Exception.
But there is an exception. That wasn't a completely accurate statement. I did attend school, and we all had smartphones, and I was able to see the negative impact that it had on both myself and my peers. And so I completely understand this issue. But my question was, in testimony, I heard from you talking about flip phones, and then the last person who testified also mentioned smartwatches, and you both cited that you've had success in your schools with those devices exempt, with those devices still being present. And I see here that it appears that the wireless communication device you have listed would also ban those flip phones or watches and those devices. So just curious if you could either clarify that, or if you would be interested in making kind of an exemption for those devices, and maybe it would ease some concerns for parents.
I can't remember if we made an exception for flip phones, or if we increased the definition to internet connectability. There's no exemption right now. Okay, there's no exemption right now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So for our school, we don't exempt Apple Watches, smartwatches, or flip phones either. So if they bring in a flip phone, they still check it in.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we do is we're trying to do two things: set a policy at the school level to help the kids succeed educationally, and then number two, we're trying to work with the culture. How do you change the culture to show these kids you don't really need a smartphone? You're a kid. You're in fourth grade, because we have issues with third graders, fourth graders waking up with 200 plus texts in the morning. Imagine that, a third grader, and many of these texts are not positive.
Yeah.
So we are trying to do two things at once: try to change the culture, but also set a policy. And I think policy ultimately sets a culture. There's no quiet law, and so it's going to say something. It's going to speak. This is an issue, and we should probably start paying attention.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great. Representative Weiss, quick, please.
Thank you. First of all, Representative Paquette, you've said pretty much everything I wanted to say, so thank you for that. And you
don't encourage it.
You asked the main question I wanted to ask, but I did want to follow up and kind of add on, because I taught in a district where we did not have reliable technology. We didn't have reliable internet. And we're also trying to teach our children 21st century skills, as you mentioned, and part of that is digital literacy. And so I often used, I had a strict cell phone policy in my classroom too, but I did allow my students to use it for academic work, and we had a lot of success in that. And have you considered districts that have those kinds of struggles that maybe don't have enough funding to support? And it's not even just like we could do a one-time appropriation and give everybody a Chromebook, but that technology needs to be maintained and updated over time, and there needs to be sustained funding to support that. And so my concern is you pass a one-fits-all policy for the entire state, but you have districts with very different needs. And I am concerned about kids who may not have the same level of access to technology in some districts versus others being left behind in those 21st century skills. And then my other question, and just as a flag, I know a lot of students who have diabetes have pumps that use cell phones as part of that, and just flagging that as well.
Yeah, for the last part, the H1 sub addresses the IDEA federal law would obviously supersede state law, but we just put in there medically necessary devices, district issued or school issued devices as well. Teachers have the discretion to make the technology a part of any classroom lesson or lesson plan, but it's at their discretion. If there's a problem with internet access, keeping devices updated, those kinds of things, that's not what we're aiming at here. We're trying to create an environment that eliminates the distraction of cell phones specifically during instruction time, but others would tell you, bell to bell. And it's just plain old mental hygiene. While the brain is developing, as Jennifer Wilson, talked about, you don't need that as an attention suck away from reading and math proficiency, which we have a problem with here in the state.
Thank you for that. I agree that that's an issue. I just encourage you to think of some of the unintended consequences.
Oh, there will be some, as there is with every legislation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I know whatever you do, Representative Tisdale, you do not approach it with a casual shoot from the hip idea. You're really been so diligent about this.
This is all blank paper.
Yeah. Well, we're impressed, and we appreciate your advocacy for the students of the state of Michigan.
And again, my thanks to my guests. And those are the people that are actually doing the hard work. I don't have any special interests or stakeholders.
Right.
We wrote this in our office, and this is about version number 5, and we try and keep making it better.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to take children out of addiction. And some children are responding with violence to taking a phone away. There have been serious stories about those kind of things happening. And so we need to help them learn that there are other ways to communicate. There's a way to have a culture without a cell phone. You can learn with it. You can have without it. You can have conversation without it. You can have positive interaction with the world without it. And that gives them a window to escape addiction. And the sooner we can do that, I think the healthier the students will be across our state. So thank you so much.
Thank you to the committee for your engagement, for enduring us. And it's a big, big topic, and I wanted to get in as many boots on the ground professionals as possible.
Thank you. We have cards that are going to be entered into the record because of the amount of time here. We do have a short comment that Bob Ryden from the Michigan... Bob Kefkin, I can't read right, sorry, from the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals, would like to speak and supports the bill. Is he here? Can you say something quickly?
You're on,
Bob. Thanks, Representative.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Very briefly, Bob Kefchin from the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals, representing about 1,800 high school, CT, and middle school principals and assistant principals. MASSP strongly supports this bill. We are very clear as membership that while we understand that some districts have local policies right now, most districts have local policies right now. The fact that we are still here debating the problems that we are having with cell phones in schools points very clearly to the fact that while we are seeing some pockets of success, more broadly we are seeing challenges. And this is where the state can come in because if we have consistent rules that don't vary building to building, district to district, classroom to classroom, it's much easier to get parents, students, and communities on board with common expectations. So I have more prepared remarks, but I'm happy to share those with the committee in writing later, and I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. I appreciate your flexibility. Thank you. Also, Jennifer Smith from the Michigan Association of School Boards would like to speak quickly. She opposes the bill.
I got it. Thank you, Madam Chairperson and the committee for allowing me to speak on this bill. I realize I am the lone voice in the woods right now, but wanted to point out some of the reasons that we are opposed. My name is Jennifer Smith, and I'm Director of the Government Relations for the Michigan Association of School Boards, and we represent the elected boards across the state. We totally agree that schools should have a cell phone policy for their students to reduce distractions and increase focus in the classroom. However, we do oppose this bill because it is far too prescriptive and will not meet the needs of all districts. We know one-size-fits-all policies do not work in education, and this is no different. Banning cell phones on all school grounds, or those devices on all school grounds for K-5 students, could be detrimental to their everyday routine. Many students walk to school or ride their bike, and parents feel better having some sort of device with their child in case something goes wrong on the way to and from school. One district in West Michigan does not bus at all because it is so geographically small, so every one of their students is either walking, riding, or being dropped off. Banning all electronic devices during instructional time at middle and high school levels also takes away the ability to use them for instructional purposes. For example, a science class at the high school may be using their phones to record reactions in order to watch them in slow motion and study them better. Finally, this bill does not include exceptions for students with a 504 plan, an IEP, or medical needs. We should not ban phones during instructional time for those populations who need them as outlined in their plans or as a medical assist. I do appreciate that there's a subcommittee that may address some of those concerns. We instead support something closer to what the state of Ohio has adopted. It requires schools to have a policy, allows them to ban the devices, but leaves the details of that policy to the local districts to determine what is best for their students and teachers. It also establishes a timeline for adoption. This would allow districts that already have policies, as we have heard about, that are working for their students and staff to continue those policies without having to make sudden changes because the state decided their policies weren't enough. We encourage you to rethink House Bill 4141 and look to give our districts a little more flexibility to make the appropriate decisions on this issue for their students, teachers, and administrators, and to find a way to limit those distractions in their classrooms. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We won't have time for questions, but we appreciate your testimony. Vice Chair Linting moves to excuse our absent member, and there will being no objection, absent members are excused, and there being no further business before the committee, the House Committee on Education and Workforce will stand adjourned.